have Liz, who you've already heard from. So Liz, if you want to do a little wave. And Wendy as well from Co-op Foundation team. I don't know, Wendy, if you're able to make yourself known, but given how large this call is, possibly not.
Hello,
we also
everyone.
have Thanks, Wendy. We also have Kedji, who is joining us from Huddle Youth Development Agency. I don't know if Kedji is currently on the call, but she will be joining us just to say a few words, and obviously we'll explain a bit about her role as well. In terms of the aims of the session today, we are obviously going to run through what our Future Communities Fund is all about. And we'll do our best as well, answer any questions at the end of the session as well. Obviously, because we've got so many people on the call, that's going to have to be via the chat function. So Wendy and Liz are going to help us to collate those questions, and we'll get through as many as we can. Anything that we can't get through today, and we're conscious again because of the volumes, we may not be able to answer everything that we would like to today. We will add to an FAQ document that we'll finish after this call and we'll share with people. Before we get started as well, we feel like there's a really important aspect of this fund, and I don't want to wait to 20 minutes into this call to just reiterate this. We have shared it previously, but in terms of the eligibility of this fund, it is only going to be available to organisations who have a turnover that is £250,000 or less via their last annual accounts or cash flow. So just in case anyone joined the call thinking that there might be some flexibility on that point, it is unfortunately something that we feel quite strongly about in terms of the eligibility for this fund. We want to be working with smaller organisations. I appreciate for some organisations on this call, £250,000 is probably still a lot, but for the organisations that we previously worked with, we have worked with a number that are much bigger than that. So hopefully it's helpful rather than irritating to say this right at the very beginning of the call. But we just wanted to make sure that people were aware, and we completely understand if at this point anybody wants to drop off the call feeling that perhaps this fund isn't for them. We won't be upset about that at all. So in terms of what we're going to run through today, go for it.
Can I ask a question? What about for new social enterprises who are starting out? Would they be able to apply for the fund?
So you would have to have at least 1 year's accounts before you're able to be eligible for the fund. So we're not working with brand new organisations.
Right. Okay. That gives some clarity. Thank you very much. Thanks.
No problem at all. Okay, so just to quickly kind of run through in terms of the aims of the session. So we're going to share information about the Future Communities Fund. We're going to outline the criteria for eligibility. So hopefully, as we get through this session, we'll answer some of the questions that people might have and that are kind of burning already. As I said, it's going to be very difficult for us to answer on the fly a lot of questions. So if we could keep those to the end of the session, please. I can see that there are people who've got their hands up, but we're not going to answer any more questions until we get to the end.
Just confirmation about the amount of the funding, please.
Go for it.
I just dropped out for a second. I missed out the amount of the funding.
In terms of the turnover of organisations, so organisations will need to have turnover on an annual basis of £250,000 or lower. So we just wanted to reiterate that at the start of the session. So if this isn't an appropriate fund for any organisations, then they have that option to drop out.
Thank you.
Louise, I'm so sorry. Can I also please just clarify? When I was emailing someone last week, they said about we're a social enterprise, we're limited by guarantee, we're not a CIC. Would we be eligible? Is it only KICs and charities that are eligible?
We're not going to answer any more. Sorry, it's just not going to be practical for us to answer lots of questions. We will get on to who's eligible and who isn't. We're actually going to run through the eligibility checker and the first stage application form. So we are not trying to limit organisations by saying this is what the legal status is that needs to be an organisation who can apply. Essentially, it's if you have a charitable purpose. So we're a lot looser than perhaps other funds or other organisations are in terms of that. But obviously, if there are very specific eligibility questions, then we'll pick those up separately. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Just to start with a little bit of kind of background in terms of who we are. So Co-op Foundation are Co-op's charity. We are really proud to be Co-op's charity and working with Co-op to cooperate for a fairer world. We feel like we're a really different kind of funder, as well as what's on this slide. We're in a very privileged position actually to be able to be a relational funder. So we build strong relationships with the organisations that we're able to fund. And we're fortunate that we're able to work in genuine partnership with organisations. So we're very aware of, and we seek to actively address the power imbalance that exists between funders and organisations that we fund. We encourage organisations to share learning with us when things don't go to plan particularly. And we hope that through this fund we're launching this week, we can take that even further in terms of step forward. We launched our strategy last month, so perhaps some of you who are on this call may have attended the webinar that we held on the 12th of October, and that was called Building Communities of the Future Together. So we committed to 3 principles essentially to working with young people, and those young people helped us to create a detailed vision of future communities, and we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. We also work in a way that pioneers a distinctly cooperative way of funding, as I just mentioned. And what that means for us is providing flexible, unrestricted funds to people who are working alongside us to build fairer, more cooperative communities of the future. And that future is the one that's been imagined by young people through our vision exercise. We also feel very strongly about funding diverse young people directly, not through this fund, I have to say, but also in terms of the organisations that are working with young people and to support young people. We also really want to focus on learning and celebrating the progress that's made in building those future fair communities. And obviously, as you'd expect as Co-op's charity, it's hugely important for us that we're working in a way that has cooperation front and centre. So that's something that we believe in, and we hope that organisations that we're working with also believe in that. So whether that's us working with others from across the cooperative movement, or whether it's working with people from social change or philanthropy sectors. So I touched on earlier the Future Communities vision. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that was. So as part of our strategy development, we went through a visioning exercise. So we worked with almost 100 young people who were aged from just 11 through to 25. And it was their views that have helped to shape our new strategy. So we held online webinars and sessions and workshops. We held face-to-face workshops, and we also had WhatsApp chats with young people. We collated all of that information that came from the young people about the things that were important to them. And we came up with 6 key priorities, which have really helped to shape the direction of travel for Co-op Foundation. These aren't on the slide, but you can read about them in our vision document, which is on our website. And I'll just very quickly run through what all 6 are before we start to talk about the 2 that we're focusing on through this fund. So we have prosperous communities with access to opportunities, safe communities, diverse, equitable and inclusive communities, healthy communities, sustainable communities, communities that prioritise youth activism, shared power and transparent governance. So as I said, we've chosen 2 of these 6 priorities.
Yeah,
It wouldn't have been practical for us to work on all of them.
So how many do you think we could do? Like, let's say over a 12-week. Should we do it as 12-week or 6-week session? 6 or 12-week?
Sorry, somebody, could I just ask the person to mute who's currently speaking, please?
Yeah. Yeah. So 12 weeks.
Can one of the team please just mute everyone, and then I'll mute myself, please. Thank you. So we've chosen 2 of these priorities for us to focus on with this fund. As I said, it wouldn't have been practical for us to work on all 6 priorities for this first round. And also we want it to be really specific about the organisations that we want to work with. We don't want to waste anybody's time. This is something that's really important to us, and part of the commitments that we've signed up to as a flexible funder through the Institute of Voluntary Action Research's flexible funder commitments. We're also just going to talk a little bit about the priorities in detail, so why we chose these particular ones and why they're important to us. So the first priority is around creating communities that are diverse, equal, and focus on inclusion. So our commitment to cooperative values, some of which are around relating to equity and social responsibility, really makes us think about how can we improve what we do. We felt that there's a huge amount of inequity in communities currently. We've seen that exacerbated by COVID-19, and now obviously we're seeing the cost of living crisis, which is hitting diverse communities even harder. Research has shown us that more targeted funding is needed. So we are really actively and deliberately changing how we target our funding to focus on those communities that we feel need it most. It's important for us as well to give you a definition of what we mean by diverse. So for us, that means people who have experience of being marginalised in society, and that could be due to their race, their gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, or essentially any other attribute that impacts on their inclusion. We know that diverse young people are woefully underrepresented and in some instances actively excluded from opportunities to thrive in leadership roles. And it is this point that we are very deliberately seeking to address through this fund. To just talk a little bit about us as well. So prior to launching the new strategy, we made 2 significant commitments this year to improving our own work and targeting our grant delivery in terms of addressing structural inequalities and focus on improving our data. The first one of these was the DEI data standard. So that's the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Data Standard, which was created by an independent working group of UK funders. They are all committed to funding equitably, and the standard really addresses how we categorise organisations and projects and just understand more about the organisations that we're working with so that we can actively advocate for consistency of funding and target that funding where it's most needed. The other area that we've done some work is with the racial justice audit. So this was run by the Funders for Race Equality Alliance. And this is about collecting data from funders to identify particularly how much funding is reaching Black and minority-led organisations. So we have gone through that process. We've shared our data. And I'll be completely honest with you, we are not at all happy with our data currently. We know that we need to work on this. It needs to be better. And partly that's because we're not asking the right questions of the organisations that we're funding. But that is something that we will be changing as we move forward so that we have that better line of sight. And the ultimate aim for us is about helping partners to target communities who need the support and who have not managed to access that support thus far. So ultimately helping those communities to thrive. The second priority that we're working on with this fund is around youth activism, shared power and transparent governance. So we are looking for organisations who are working across both of these priorities. So it's not just diversity, equity and inclusion or youth activism, shared power and transparent governance, but actually it's the crossover, the intersection of these 2 priorities that is really important here. We're really proud of what we've done thus far in terms of supporting young people through our grant making, and that's thanks to the partners that we've worked with thus far. But for example, we're an I Will Fund match funder, and happy I Will Fund Week to anybody who's participating in any of the sessions through that. And we also do campaigning work. So you might have seen our Lonely Not Alone campaign, which focuses on addressing the stigma of youth loneliness and which has been really effective and powerful. Along with Co-op Group as well, we've also signed up to the Power of Youth Charter, which we just shared on our social channels this week. And that really underpins our commitment to continue to support young people. This is really important to us. But most of all, we have got incredible partners. There is not enough time this morning to tell you about the amazing work that they do, but they are a constant inspiration to us. And you can find our last impact report on our website if you want to read a bit more about what some of our partners have been doing. We've had lots of people involved in our work to date. So we have previously had a youth advisory group who supported our grant making, and also we've worked with Co-op's Young Members Group. So they've helped us with co-creating products and services. And we've had many generous conversations actually with other funders who are probably several steps ahead of us in terms of this journey. So working with young people in a participatory grant making way. And they have really opened our eyes to just what a transformation it can be to have young people really front and centre, not just making funding decisions, but actually involved throughout the whole funding process and helping us to steer the organisation, as we've seen through the visioning exercise. So we made a decision at that point that it was really our ambition to have young people much more embedded in and contributing all of the funding process that we do. Future Communities Collective then. So this is what we're calling the young people who will support our grant making. So it's the first time that we're going to be working in this way specifically. So as I said, we've worked with young people previously. We do a lot to support young people, but that has largely for us been a bit of an advisory capacity. And we're moving into a completely different gear here. So we're starting with a pilot. We think that that's the most sensible way to do this. This means that we are deliberately going to gather lots of learning as we go along. We want to do this well. We want to learn from what other grant makers have done. And their really strong advice to us was to find an experienced partner who was used to working with young people. So in order to do that, we have chosen to work with Huddle, who are an amazing youth development agency who have got heaps of experience in supporting young people. They've previously worked with other grant makers, and we will be paying young people for their time, recognising that they're giving up other opportunities for paid work, or that they have other priorities that they're trying to fit this in around, and they're bringing genuine experience and knowledge and contributions to the table. We'll be providing training for them, and we'll provide whatever other support is needed to make sure that they get the best amount of experience and added benefits from going through this whole experience. So that's a really important part of this for us. I'm now going to hand over to Kedji from Huddle, who hopefully is on the call, who is just going to say a little bit about how Huddle work. So Kedji, if you could just talk to this slide and tell us a bit about what you're going to be doing with our young people, please.
Okay, sure. Hi, Louise, can you hear me? Yeah, wonderful.
I can, thanks.
Do you want me to speak to this specific slide, or should I speak to the next one?
To this one, or freestyle in whatever way you think would be useful in terms of what people might be interested to hear, please, Kedji.
Well, Louise, you've said quite a bit about us anyway, so what I'll do is I'll just kind of add on to that. So hi everyone, so my name is Kedji Okero from Huddle Youth Development Agency. We are based in London, but we work UK-wide, and we will be partnering with the Co-op Foundation to recruit, support, train young people aged 18 to 25 in order for them to develop the process, the selection and assessment process for the pilot. We are currently recruiting 8 young people from across the UK. And as Louise mentioned, we are also working with other funders in the sector to do exactly the same thing in terms of bringing young people on board to work with funders to think about who, what and how they fund. If anyone at any point has any questions in regards to how we'll be supporting the young people, please feel free to contact Louise and the team, and or to contact myself directly with any of your questions. We're really looking forward to working with young people, and we're really looking forward to the grants that are made in this pilot round.
Thanks so much, Keji. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of reflect on what it's going to mean for our funding process, having the Future Communities Collective involved. And as I said, you know, we've never entirely given away power to young people before, so this is really exciting for us. It's also slightly scary, I'll be completely honest with you. We don't quite know how this is going to work or where we're going to get to. Thank goodness we've got Keji's support alongside the young people. We know that there are things about our funding process that we're going to be talking about today that could potentially change as a result of the involvement of young people. And if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't actually be doing genuine participatory grant making, because that is kind of the point. It's if you are giving power to young people to make decisions and to shape things, then you have to be willing to deal with whatever the consequences are. And if the young people turn around to us and say, you have got this completely wrong, you need to go back to the drawing board and think this through and start again, then we've got to be willing to suck that up and say, right, okay, absolutely, let's start again. So everything that we're talking about, once we move into what you're probably all really waiting for, which is the specifics of actually what we're going to be funding, is subject to that change. So whether it's about the timeline, whether it's about, you know, the organisations that we're going to be working with. So we just want to kind of put that caveat out there, and this may be a different way for all of you to work with a funder as well. So we would, with whoever ends up on this journey with us, be kind of learning together through that. So I just thought that was a really important point to make. The other thing that we want to just highlight is, as I said, you know, this is a pilot exercise. The Future Communities Collective, who are working with us on this first round of Future Communities Fund, will not be with us longer term. So they're only signed up to see us through to the funding decisions for this first round. We will be recruiting for a longer term Future Communities Collective that basically picks up, hoovers up all of the learning from this experience that we've had with working with young people and build something that is more kind of longer term and informed by this first exercise. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so this is the kind of, I guess this is the meat of the sandwich or the filling of the sandwich that everyone's kind of been waiting for. What are we offering in terms of funding? And we shared some of this information already, so hopefully it won't come as a massive surprise, but I just wanted to add a bit more information. So we have a total funding pot of 1.5 million. We are offering unrestricted funding to organisations. So we're talking about up to £30,000 per year for up to 5 years. This is the first time that we have committed to funding for as long as this. But what we have heard from the sector is what people need is longer term certainty, particularly now, so that they can plan and focus on actually doing what they do to deliver. So we've taken that on board and we feel very strongly that this is the right thing to do. You don't need to apply for the maximum grant size. I think that's a really important point. So up to £30,000 a year for 5 years is available. If you would prefer to only have 3 years funding, if you would prefer to only ask for £10,000, that's fine. So our calculations are based on, you know, we've got 1.5 million available. So, you know, we will work with organisations, and however far that goes is how far it goes. And you know, we would expect, obviously, if everybody was going for the maximum funding, that we would only be able to offer 10 grants. But if people ask for lower amounts, which is proportionate to where their organisation is at right now, then obviously we'll be able to fund more organisations. We know that offering unrestricted funding is a bit like the holy grail of funding. And again, this is feedback that we've heard from so many organisations and other funders and charities that we've spoken to and our own partners. So we wanted to kind of build on and demonstrate the trust that we have in organisations to decide the best way to use their funding. And this is about in furtherance of their mission or strategy or charitable objects. It comes with no strings. You know, it's not about buying outcomes. It's not project funding, But equally, while we are offering unrestricted funding, again, that doesn't mean that an organisation who's applying to us has to have unrestricted funding. If your organisation is just getting started and it's only their kind of second or third year of operation, and you feel that you would be more comfortable with project funding, that's a conversation that we're more than happy to have. But we feel that we buy into the Institute for Voluntary Action Research's 7 principles of why it's important to fund in an unrestricted way. I'm not going to read all of these out. You can see them on the screen, but hopefully you can see they are all very good reasons, and they are so closely aligned to how we want to work with organisations and how we want to be empowering organisations to be able to deliver the best that they can with funding that's available to them. Another crucial slide then, so onto the detail of the eligibility criteria for the organisations that we'll be able to fund. So coming back to the point that I made right at the beginning of this call, organisations must have an annual turnover of £250,000 or less. This is a crucial eligibility criteria, and it's because we want to work with smaller organisations. We appreciate that isn't small, but we're talking smaller organisations than perhaps we previously have done. We anticipate that those organisations have historically maybe been a bit less successful at accessing funding. We know that this limit or criteria will be disappointing to some organisations, maybe some of the organisations who we funded in the past, but I really hope that people can understand why we are doing this, particularly with these 2 priorities that we're focusing on. This isn't the only round of funding that we'll have under the Future Communities Fund, so subsequent rounds might have different turnover limits, but this is a pilot. We're going to see where we get to, but the focus for us is really about trying to work with organisations that are maybe working in communities that we haven't been able to get to before. And I know some other funders might describe that as kind of hard to reach organisations. I would describe the funders as being hard to reach. So we are trying not to be a hard to reach funder. That's really important to us. So we'll have a detailed FAQ that covers off the point, and coming back to the question that was asked very early on about how do you define an organisation that has a charitable purpose. We are trying not to be prescriptive, and again, this is quite new territory for us. So historically, we would have been quite prescriptive about this is the type of organisation that you need to have. We feel that limiting the turnover and saying that you have to have a charitable purpose will lead us to the organisations that would be in a position to apply for funding if they're working across the 2 priority areas that we want them to be. So within the eligibility checker that's built into our first stage application form that we're going to take you through in a minute, you'll see that there are a number of boxes that you can tick about your organisation's legal status, but actually what we're interested in is the box that sits beneath it, where you tell us about your charitable purpose and how you see the work that you're doing as charitable. So hopefully that makes sense. In terms of delivering services exclusively in the UK, what do we mean by that? So your governing document must set out that your work can only take place in the UK. That's because we are funding on an unrestricted basis. So if we gave to an organisation whose governing document said that they could deliver work anywhere in the world, but currently they were only delivering in the UK, that organisation is not prevented from beginning work elsewhere. So we need to have organisations that are just delivering in the UK. Again, I hope you can understand that. And that's our own charitable objects that set that out and specify that. So what we want to fund via Future Communities Fund, we felt it might be useful just to give you some examples of how your organisation can stand out and talk to us about the things that we think are important through these 2 priorities that we've talked about. We won't be testing all of this at the first stage, because the whole point of the first stage application is that it's really simple, it's easy to complete, hopefully it's quick, it won't take you too much time, and ultimately you'll find out whether you're eligible very quickly. But one thing that I did want to draw out from this slide, rather than going through the whole thing, is that essentially your organisation must already be doing work that removes barriers for diverse young people who have experienced potentially multiple layers of inequality. And you must also be comprehensively supporting these young people to move into leadership roles. So that is the absolute critical point, is the crossover of those two aspects is what we're looking to fund. So now we are going to move on. I'm going to stop presenting for a minute and I'm going to hand over to Wendy, and Wendy's going to take us through our application form, which has got a built-in eligibility checker. So hopefully that will help in terms of just having that real sense of clarity about what we're looking for. So over to you, Wendy, please.
Hi everyone, welcome. This is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we did think it was useful for you to be able to see this application form in its first stage. I'm going to knock my camera off because there's so many of us here, and I'm in the deep southwest, which doesn't always have the best reception, so bear with me. Okay, so as Louise has already outlined, the criteria for this fund is aimed at quite a particular group of organisations, and so we have been very specific with the design of this first stage form. I'm going to take you through it quite quickly, but after this session you'll be able to look at the recording, and if you have any technical questions, Louise will give you a contact email address at the end of the presentation. As you can see, the form has a brief introduction, and we have to stress again that attending this session or watching the subsequent recording will give you the most relevant information about what we are looking for in a standout application. You can go in and out of the forms as many times as you like before submitting, but it doesn't save automatically, so make sure that you press save before you leave if you're going back. If you miss out a required question, it will tell you that you've missed it and take you back. Once you have submitted, though, you can't go back in, so make sure you're all done before you submit the form. If you can scroll down a little bit, Liz, yeah. As you can see, there are a series of yes/no questions on this form, and there is no grey area for these answers. You must opt for one or the other. If you answer yes to any question at this stage, another box will pop up asking for some more brief information. Again, if you answer yes at this point, you will be required to evidence that in the form of documentation should we progress your application further. And no response to any of the questions on this first page will result in your organisation being ineligible for the fund, and you won't be able to progress to the next stage of the form. We apologise if this appears somewhat brutal, but what we don't want to do is waste your precious time if you don't meet the criteria at this point. If you do answer with a clear no and are told that you can't proceed any further, please don't be tempted to go back and change your answer to yes in order to progress, as again, this will be wasting your valuable resources now and further down the line. Louise has talked briefly about the annual income figure in question 3. What we're saying is that this must be based on the last accounts that you produced. And we appreciate that the format of this will vary depending on what kind of business model you have adopted. And there have been a lot of questions about this in the chat, so maybe the specifics will need a little bit more work for you individual people. But we will consider applications from newer organisations, but what you must have is at least one set of accounts that have been signed off by your governing body, and that could be your trustees, your directors, your treasurer, your chair, depending on the type of organisation you have. Questions 4 and 5 is where we need more information about your work in our priority areas. Again, briefly asking how you work in the areas of youth activism and DEI. And hopefully after attending this session or accessing the recording, you'll have a really good idea of what we're looking for in this round of the Future Communities Fund. If you survive this first page and you have answered all our questions and think that you can benefit from funding, then you can go on to the second page. Question 6 asks for some organisation details. Again, as Louise has said, you don't have to be a registered charity to apply, and we will consider excuse me, a variety of business models. What you must be able to do is evidence that you're a voluntary sector organisation with a charitable purpose. Depending on how you answer, each of these boxes will trigger a further question asking for more information. The areas of operation obviously must be in the UK, as Louisa said, and you can tick more than one box, but it all depends on where you operate and how widespread your activities are. Question 7 and 8 is where we ask for more detail about how you work in our priority areas. You'll notice that in question 7, we give you very specific guidance about how we consider your board and senior leadership team to be representative of your community or communities. These figures of 75% of board and 50% of senior leadership team are taken from the standard outlined in the recent racial justice audit, and it's our benchmark for this priority area. Again, we must be honest with you, if you answer no at this point, we are unlikely to progress your application further. If you do tick the working towards box, bear in mind that you must be prepared to explain and evidence where you are in that journey towards meaningful representation. Similarly, for question 8, we want to know how you are going further with your youth social action activities to prepare people, specifically young people, for leadership roles in the governance of your organisation. As Louisa said, in this section, be descriptive. Give us examples of how you deliver in these areas. Show us how you work and how your organisation operates, especially in the intersection of these two priority themes. Section 9 and 10 are contact details and data collection, and of course we encourage you to sign up to our blog to hear firsthand about what we're up to at the Foundation and any future funding opportunities. Once you've submitted the form, you will get a confirmation email which encloses a summary of all your answers. If you don't get that email, chances are you haven't submitted, so do go back and double check that you've filled everything in and submitted the form. And that's it. It's short and sweet, and as I said, a whistle-stop tour. If you have questions about the form, Louise will give you an email address at the end of the presentation, and we'd be happy to address those individual concerns. I'll hand you back to Louise now, who's going to tell you more about the expected application process beyond this initial application form.
Thanks, Wendy. Right, I'm just going to try and resume my presentation. Keep your fingers crossed. Of course, it takes me back to the start, so I shall just skip forward. Okay, so the process itself. So again, we are trying something completely new here. We have taken you through the first stage application and eligibility check, and hopefully that's really helpful in terms of seeing what's going to come up. We'll also share within the FAQ document what those questions are, so you don't have to go into that form to see what you're going to be asked. But we're not asking for lots of information. We also appreciate that sometimes it's more difficult to summarize what your organization does in fewer words than it is to have a limitless word count. But obviously, in terms of the practicalities of us being able to review everything, and also us not wanting to waste your time spending too long doing this, hopefully that's helpful. So the first stage of it then is that what we're kind of loosely calling the "is it right for me" stage. So the completion of that first stage application and eligibility checker to find out if funding is available for your organisation. If once we review the information that you've submitted to us, we find that actually we don't think that what your organisation is currently doing is a good fit, then what we'll do is we will let you know that as quickly as possible, and we'll give you some feedback as to why we think that that's the case. Because again, feedback that we receive from the organisations that we work with and the wider sector is that feedback is the most critical thing that people need in order to kind of be clear about, you know, how they can improve what they submit to other organisations, or just knowing actually why it wasn't a good fit. It's also great learning for us as well, because we can see where we can be clearer in terms of when we talk about a new fund being launched, that we can hopefully head off any potential questions or areas that are not that clear for people. if we feel that there is a good fit with your organisation and what we're looking to fund, then what we'll do is we will invite you to join us for a chat. So we are deliberately trying to make this not feel onerous or time consuming. We're going to give you the questions in advance. It's not a test. It's not, we're not trying to kind of trip you up. We genuinely just want to hear a bit more about what your organisation's been doing. So this is a really important part of how we hear more about the work. What we'll do is we will summarise the conversation that we have, and we will then read that back to young people, because ultimately, as we've said before, the young people that we're working with are going to be the ones who decide who's invited through to submit a full application. And again, if after we've had the conversation with you, we feel that actually your organisation is not as close a fit as others, then we'll let you know why that's the case. So working with the young people from our Future Communities Collective, we will come up with a list of organisations who we invite through to submit a full application. That full application we feel is really important that we offer lots of different ways for people to apply. So again, this could be a form. So if your organisation is used to completing forms, quite comfortable with that, and actually finds the structure quite helpful, then that's completely fine. We'll have a form. If you would prefer to have a conversation with us, then we'll just take you through the questions that are on that form, but we'll talk to you and we'll complete the form for you. If you want to send us a video answering some of the questions that we have, then that's fine, or a voice recording. So we're trying to come up with ways that basically put you in the driving seat in terms of what's your organisation most comfortable with in terms of applying, and trying to make that as easy as possible. So we, as I said earlier, we do expect to have around, so if everybody, there's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes here, but if everybody applies for the maximum amount of funding that they can, so £30,000 per year over 5 years, which would be £150,000 in total, then we would expect to see 10 organisations ultimately being funded. So we expect to invite probably 20 organisations through to make 10 decisions. If we have organisations applying for smaller amounts of money, then we would expect to invite more of those organisations through. But what we're really aiming to have is probably about a 50% success rate. So if you're invited through at the second stage to submit an application, like a full application, then we wouldn't expect to have loads of organisations invited through to make a reasonably small number of decisions. And obviously, the decision that we've made to offer longer term funding has meant that we are constrained by how many grants that we're able to make, but we felt that that was the right decision. The Future Communities Collective, in terms of making the final funding decision, they will be supported by 2 of our trustees, so from our main board of trustees, and we have 2 younger trustees, both of whom are under 30, who are going to be supporting that work with us. So that's George and Hope, who you can read a bit more about on our website if you are interested. And as I've just said earlier on as well, the huge disclaimer that comes with all of this is that young people haven't seen this process yet. We are only just in the process of finalising their recruitment. So until we start to work with them and explain to them what we're doing, there is a bit of ambiguity, or things could change. It's a little bit fluid, and we're having to just kind of roll with that. Which is tricky if you're a control freak like me. In terms of the indicative timeline for applications, we again are calling this indicative because we don't quite know. Obviously, this is down to young people's availability alongside everything else. But we're trying to, so one of the commitments that we signed up to through we need organisations to be doing this work. We don't want people hanging around for 6 or 9 months waiting to know whether they've got the funding.
Oh, Louise, you're dipping in and out a little bit, so I'm just wondering if you could, once you're back with us. Oh,
Should I turn my camera off?
yeah, just if you could just repeat the
Does that help?
last two little bits that you mentioned, because you broke up a little bit. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks, Liz. So the timeline that we have is, I don't know what the 2 bits were that I mentioned, so I'm not sure that I can repeat them.
They
But
were timeline, waiting for decisions, and everything on from that.
Yeah, so in terms of the timeline, we are looking to launch the fund. So on Friday at 9 o'clock, we will launch access to the form that Wendy has taken you through. So you'll be able to have a play about with that. We have got our first stage applications open until midday on the 23rd of December. So there's a full 4 weeks for you to have a look at that form, ask us any questions if things aren't clear, and make your submission to us. We are going to be processing those submissions as we go along. So I think it would be a big mistake for us to wait until the 23rd of December to look at all of these. So just to kind of keep all of that moving. So you may hear from us earlier if you submit at the earlier point in terms of whether your organisation is able to proceed to have those conversations. So we might have conversations earlier on in the process, and we may have some that take place after Christmas. We will then, as I said, summarise both the first stage application forms that people have submitted alongside the outputs of the chat that we've had with people as well. So we'll keep comprehensive notes of the conversations that we have, and we'll summarise that information back to our Future Communities Collective and talk to them about the process and how we've kind of gone through all of this. We expect that we will be inviting people to full application lightly late January, obviously again subject to young people's availability, and we expect that the full application process will close and that we will begin the assessments at some point in February. At the minute, our expected end panel date, so the decisions by the Future Communities Collective and our 2 board members, Hope and George, will take place on the 22nd of February. Again, that is subject to change, or do you know what, we might just find that actually it's just not achievable, because once young people start to work with us and we get their feedback on what we're planning, it may be that they just need us to do some more work on what this looks like. So that's where we are now, just kind of setting our stall out in terms of trying to be as clear as possible. And that's kind of it, really. We wanted to leave a bit of time for questions. I appreciate we've probably only got 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to pick out some of the questions that have come through. One of them that someone has popped into the chat, which is around whether partnership working is possible. So if they're a smaller organisation leading with a larger organisation supporting a small part of the project. Actually, one of the questions that we had on one of the slides, or one of the things that we feel are important, is that there is that degree of cooperation and partnership working, collaboration, whatever you want to call it, taking place. So a partnership that delivers in that way, we don't have any issue with, as long as the organisation who actually holds the grant with us is the smaller of the organisation, so is within the kind of turnover limits. I guess what we would want to avoid is, I guess, what I would describe as kind of forced partnerships in order to get around that rule. So we would need to be clear that, you know, there was an absolute kind of rationale behind the partnership that was being put in place, and that it was a sensible one that made, you know, that made sense and was going to deliver. And was in this, I guess I would describe it as being in the spirit of the fund. Hopefully that helps. I can't actually stop sharing yet. And I can see a few more of you.
I'm just going to jump in dead quickly just to come up with some. There's been a few admin questions that we've tried to answer as we've been going along. We're getting quite a few questions now saying, is it capital, is it core costs, and etc. And just wanted to reiterate the point about it being unrestricted funding to help your project. We will obviously be going through applications and going through what the funding is going towards in more detail when we are speaking to you, but it is unrestricted funding. There's a few questions around access to the recording and access to the slides. Everyone that's registered for this event, so even if they've had to drop off or etc., we will be sending out a copy of the recording. It may not be immediate, just you've got to bear with us just to sort out techie bits and bobs, but we will be sending out an email to everybody that's got the recording, and we will be adding it to a web page on the Future Communities Fund, which will feature the recording, slides and guidance and FAQs, etc. And there's been a few people saying, please could they have access to the application link, which is obviously the question I would be asking as a fundraiser in a previous life. The form is not live until Friday, so and it will be included in the information that we send out to you. So we will send that out to you so you've got it ready and waiting for when it opens. They were just a few of the general questions that were coming through, and I'm going to hand over to Wendy with any others that we've spotted that we've not answered, because we have been trying to answer them in the chat, but as you can appreciate, there's been quite a lot of questions, so we will take the chat away and go through the questions and make sure that if there's any big ones in there that they're included in the guidance.
I'm surprised you can't see flames coming off Liz and I's fingers, because we're typing away in the background. But if I can throw a quick one at you, Louise, one that's been I think some people are quite confused about representation of the board, thinking that representation should be youth. Could you expand on that a little bit? I mean, obviously we want to promote youth participation into leadership roles, but I've been answering individual questions about how that representation is far more, lived experience or representation of the communities you serve. But if you could sum that up for us, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are organisations who are working across multiple communities, and obviously we mean this in the broadest sense. We're not talking geographical communities, we're talking about communities of interest. So it might be a particular ethnic community, it might be the intersection of a particular ethnic community with another attribute. So it could be LGBTQ people. We are not being prescriptive, but I guess the mission and the purpose of your organisation needs to have that kind of reflective board of trustees and leadership team. In terms of the involvement of young people, what we would want to see is that young people are meaningfully involved in how your organisation operates. So if your organisation's purpose and mission is about delivering services for young people, we would want to see young people involved in that. We were at a conference last week for the Association of Charitable Foundations.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation about that downstairs. Years ago,
could you mute yourself, please? There's a few people unmuted
in Scotland and broadcast.
Thank you. It's easy enough for me to lose my train of thought at the best of times. But yeah, so in terms of young people, what we would want to see is that young people are meaningfully involved. So we were at a conference last week, which was the Association of Charitable Foundations, where there was some speakers talking about co-production not being enough. And I think we are in agreement there, is that if you are delivering work that is for young people, that young people need to be actively involved and delivering and supporting how your organisation delivers its services. We want to make sure that the organisations are really taking that on board and involving young people in a meaningful way. Any other questions that we have coming through? So there's a question that we've got in the background here, which is, will you be awarding based on geographical location too? Well, this is a UK-wide fund, so we would actively encourage applications from across all of the UK, but we do not have any restrictions in terms of what the geography is of what you're delivering. So you could be delivering at a grassroots community level in one specific location, or you could be delivering across multiple locations or UK-wide. Obviously, in all likelihood, because this has a turnover limit of £250,000, we don't expect too many organisations to be delivering right across the UK.
It's Emmanuel here. Pardon me. Just confirmation. Did you say the funding can be used for both core costs and capital costs, or either one?
So it's unrestricted funding, Emmanuel. So we do not have any restrictions on how you spend the funding. The only thing that we say in respect of unrestricted is that it needs to be in furtherance of your charitable aims. So your organisation needs to be delivering charitable activities in line with the priorities that we set out for this fund, and you can spend the money in whatever way you deem appropriate. Obviously, we'll have a conversation about what your organisation's financial position is as part of the full application process if you get through to the second stage.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions that we've got popping up? There's so many in the chat that it's quite hard for me to kind of go through.
Hi, may I? Hi, it's Christina here.
Hiya.
Hi. I was wondering, in our articles of association, we are a UK charity, but we can also operate worldwide. A thing that we have never done. Actually, we are a very young charity. So I was wondering if we apply with a project that literally is doable only in the UK, will you still exclude us?
I'm going to say no. I don't think that we would exclude you. So we have said that we would fund unrestricted. But if it was project funding and we were able to, if you like, protect the way in which the funding was delivered through that, making it a restricted fund for project funding, then I think that that would essentially mean that you were eligible for funding. However, we may need to think about, and this is why we did not release our eligibility and first stage application form on the same day as this session, because we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to think through some of the questions that would come in and actually, is that form right? So that's given us some really good food for thought. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's good news. I hope you will work on that. Thank you very much.
I think on a general
just a
point,
really
Louise, sorry,
sorry, go on, Wendy.
Liz. Just briefly, a few people have asked the same question. I think Louise has hit the nail on the head, because if it was unrestricted funding and we were funding for 5 years, even though you haven't funded outside of the UK already, I think because it's unrestricted funding, it would be very difficult for us to know that that was being used in the UK, because you could be using your core costs in other nations. But if it's project costs that is specifically aimed at the UK, I think that would be far easier for us to consider.
So I think what we might do is we might pop an extra question onto that form just to cover off that point. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it, rather than kicking out organisations. I'm conscious that we are just about out of time. So this, as we said, this recording will be sent out to people and also will be hosted on our website. We'll send out the link to our web page for this fund as well. If there are any specific questions that you have, I'm conscious that there are a lot of people on this call. So if we could just ask you to give us a bit of time to go through all of the FAQs and answer them and upload them onto that web page. So if you give us until Friday, please. If once we have uploaded that FAQ document, if you find that your question isn't answered, please do then contact us and we'll give all the contact details in that email. But if you can hold off until Friday, please, because obviously we are actually quite a small team, and this is likely to generate a lot of emails for us, which hopefully we can head off at the pass through the FAQ document. So I hope that's okay, and hopefully this has been a helpful session, but conscious that we are out of time. Emmanuel, I'll let you dive in with one last question.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you. You're on mute. Still on mute.
think your microphone isn't working, Emmanuel. So if you could pop it in the chat and then we
Sorry,
can try and get
can you
to
hear me
it.
now?
He's with us.
Okay, now.
Sorry about that. What is the minimum age of young people we can work with? The minimum age.
So we, through our visioning exercise, we worked with the youngest group of people was aged 11. So
Okay.
that's who we would look
I
to
thought I've
work
got
with.
it
Thank
wrong,
you.
but I put it down here just to confirm.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Sorry to disturb. I
question.
know
Thank
we
you.
don't have the time, but I do have a question. I mean, I've got 3 questions. I don't know if you could take them because I've asked a couple of them in the chat, and I'm not sure if we can call your organizations. Could I just quickly mention them and you could take a note? Because I don't think they will be in the FAQ.
Okay, go for it.
Number 1, how long time have you been working with the young people that took part of your R&D? Also their background abilities and where they were locating, where they were coming from. Number 2, what's the percentage of organizations you might be planning to select to be successful for this funding? So, for example, I come from London, but if you have big cities, because the problem with this is sometimes they assume that big cities, there's enough funding around, and if your aim is to actually promote maybe 50% of big cities or maybe just 10%, it will actually help for small organizations like us and decide if we're going to spend quite a lot of time applying for this fund. And the third question is, I suppose you want to select as many diverse organizations, but it happened before where I've been invited and people were, I mean, my team and I have been invited and people, the funder were really, really insisting. And I'm not the only one, but actually, we all know that when we apply for funding, we might not get successful, but it was confirmed that it was actually to get Black and minority organization to apply for the funding for data and records. So it's also to find out if you have a percentage of different type of organizations and their background and where they're located, how actually will be the process of you selecting the 10 or 20 organizations that will be successful for the funding. It sounds a bit weird the way I'm asking the question, but as lived experience, it's hurtful to actually sit down, spend the time, and then we don't even get to why we were not selected. And further down the line, when there is an inquiry, then you start to find out why this has happened.
I think some really searching questions there that are crucial. I'm really conscious of time that we're running over, and I don't want to be dismissive of what are really important questions. So I'm going to just quickly say a few things. First of all, we don't have particular percentage quotas. We are not making the funding decisions, so the young people that we're working with are making the decisions. In terms of, I think your first question was about the Future Communities Collective. I couldn't quite hear you, you were breaking up, and what their background is. So that the invitations to join the Future Communities Collective were to young people who had participated in our visioning exercise, co-op young members group members, some of the young people who our partners are supporting and working with. And also Kedri from Huddle has reached out to young people who worked on the We Move fund with Huddle previously. Our entire purpose of this pilot exercise was within the constraints that sets to try and recruit as diverse as possible a group of young people to support our funding decisions. We know that this will not be perfect, either in terms of geographical distribution or lots of other reasons, because we have been quite prescriptive about the groups of people that we are reaching out to, and also the age group of young people that we have chosen to work with for this pilot is older than the young people that we can kind of support through this fund. So I think that's an important thing, because we don't want this to be an extractive process for young people. We want them to be supported, equipped and able to actually come at this and be able to feel that it's a positive and meaningful experience for them. And we would work with younger people, but actually we would need to take longer over that process. So I can't answer that fully. We will in the FAQs. I promise you, give you some more detail on that and make sure that we answer it. But equally, I'm happy to have a conversation about this with you directly if that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I think yes, and I'm more than happy. If you could, this would be actually helpful. And share
Great.
it in the FAQ. All right.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, thanks so much, everybody, for turning up today. I hope this has really been a helpful experience, and hopefully we shall see some applications coming through from you. Thank you. Have a great day.